Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and I'm going to be sharing the very last class of a 7-month series of classes that I've been sharing. This is a 7-month program where I've been gradually walking students through chapter by chapter the first book of our book series, which is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Over the last 7 months, I've been guiding students in building a foundation of the path to enlightenment and how to move the mind to this awakened mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So now, the very last class, what I'm going to be doing is sharing the 5 hindrances, the 5 obstructions that are going to block you from actually attaining enlightenment. I'm going to share with you what they are and how to actually eliminate them from the mind, because these 5 things, if you have those in the mind, then it will obstruct you from actually getting to enlightenment itself. So welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we start our class is I start with a meditation. I'll guide you guys in meditation, and then afterwards I'll share with you the 5 hindrances. And not only am I going to share with you the 5 hindrances, but you're going to learn the 7 factors of enlightenment as well. And we're going to really focus in on right mindfulness, because that's so important to be able to purify the mind. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way I do this is I start with some chanting to ease us into meditation, which you guys are welcome to chant along. Then I'm going to provide some guidance. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet. We'll be meditating together. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. So if you'd like to take a position that's comfortable for you, you're welcome to do that. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. And as I mentioned, I'll just start with chanting and then come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakevanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakevata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakevato Savaka Sankho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Pisu Mahakeva Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes And start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thoughts, label them, judge them, analyze them, or even try to figure out where they're coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาโอตังภะคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหคะวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหคะวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, once again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys. Welcome to our class today. Whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, this is the very last day of our group learning program. It's a 7-month program where I gradually walk students through understanding the foundational teachings of what it takes to move the mind to enlightenment. And we use volume 1 of the book series, The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. The title of this book is Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And I've been guiding students through over the last 7 months of each individual chapter. In each Sunday's class, I will share that particular chapter. And over this 7-month period, I've been guiding students to understand the path to enlightenment. Here at the end of our course, before we're getting ready to start a new program next Sunday, I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 obstructions that are going to hinder you from being able to attain enlightenment. Because over the last 7 months, I've been teaching how to get to enlightenment. Now it's an opportunity to look at what's going to stop you from getting to enlightenment. And this is something that the Buddha actually taught during his lifetime, is what were the 5 hindrances, or the obstructions, the obstacles that are going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. So just like always, as we go on our class today, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that and then answer any questions that you might have. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand when we get to the question period, and I'll be able to call on you, and you can unmute your microphone and then ask any and all questions that you like. So just to get us started off, I'm sharing with you here the words of the Buddha, where he introduces the 5 hindrances. There's different places in his teachings where he talks about the 5 hindrances, but this is just where he's kind of introducing you to them and just kind of mentioning what they are, and then kind of a general remedy for them. What he says is, monks, there are these 5 hindrances. What 5? The hindrance of sensual desire, the hindrance of ill will, the hindrance of complacency, the hindrance of restlessness and worry, the hindrance of doubt. These are the 5 hindrances. This noble eightfold path is to be developed for direct knowledge or experience of these 5 hindrances, for the full understanding of them, for their complete destruction, for their abandoning. So here the Buddha is sharing what the 5 hindrances are, and he's saying it's the eightfold path that's going to help you to essentially eliminate these out of the mind. In terms of the path to enlightenment, if anybody was interested in getting on the path to enlightenment using the original teachings of the Buddha, you would need to know the eightfold path, inside and out, backwards, forwards. It's the eightfold path that is your life practice. This is the path to enlightenment. In terms of eradicating the pollutions out of the mind, it's the eightfold path that you would need to learn backwards, forwards, left, right, up, down. You would need to know it like the back of your hand. And that's a foundational teaching that I'm going to be helping students to understand when we restart this group learning program. That the second, third, and fourth class of the group learning program, I'm going to be walking you through slowly but surely each section of the Eightfold Path. In 3 separate classes, we're going to be diving in really deep to understand what the Eightfold Path is, using the original words of the Buddha. And I'm going to show you how to learn it, investigate it, and examine it, how to reflect on it to independently verify that it's true, and then how to practice it, because that's where you actually experience the real results when you're practicing the Eightfold Path. But above and beyond the Eightfold Path, there's actually other solutions for the 5 hindrances. The Eightfold Path is a foundational teaching. If you're interested in making any kind of progress on the path to enlightenment, you would need to know the Eightfold Path. But there's other teachings where the Buddha goes in and he talks about the 5 hindrances, and he talks about the 7 factors of enlightenment are the solution to eradicating the 5 hindrances. So these 5 hindrances have similarities to the 10 fetters. If you remember back to chapter 3 and some of the other classes where I've been talking about the 10 fetters, this is the most detailed description that the Buddha describes of what's going on in the unenlightened mind and why it keeps experiencing all the discontent feelings. The anger, the sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of these and other discontent feelings are all being caused because of these 10 fetters. He referred to them as fetters because in ancient times, they would attach a fetter to your ankle to keep you trapped and confined in a certain area. If you were a criminal or a prisoner, they would basically have you in an open field, and they would have a shackle, a chain, and a ball around your ankle, and that's how you would stay confined to a certain area. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells and things like this. Well, during ancient times, they would attach this fetter to your ankle and it would keep you trapped in that particular area. So the Buddha describes these 10 pollutions of mind as fetters, that they keep the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. It's through learning and practicing the Eightfold Path that helps you to eliminate the 10 fetters. And you also need the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment are a tool to fine-tune the mind. They're not to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened. It's actually to fine-tune the mind. So a combination of the Eightfold Path and the 7 factors of enlightenment is what will eliminate the 5 hindrances. And because there's similarities between the 5 hindrances and the 10 fetters, you're also working to eliminate those as well. So the Buddhist teachings oftentimes point to each other in either direct ways or indirect ways. You can see that here when I show you the 5 hindrances, or if you're familiar with the 10 fetters, you can already see that already, that they're kind of pointing to each other. Out of the 5 hindrances, 4 of them are actually fetters, where the 5th one isn't actually one of the fetters, but it's something that's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. So another example of this is like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. These are all interconnected teachings. The Buddha kind of teaches in these layers, and they kind of point to each other at different times. So if there's ever any kind of struggles or obstacles or impediments to the path to enlightenment, that you're feeling like you're bogged down and you just can't make any progress walking forward on the path, it can be really helpful to look at the 5 hindrances individually and then excuse me, and then apply the individual solutions, which can actually remove these hindrances and can allow you to make further progress on the path to enlightenment. So this is why it's important to be able to understand what the five hindrances are, because anytime you're feeling bogged down and you're not making any progress on the path, you can look to see the five hindrances and what it is that's actually holding you back. And now you can implement the solutions to eradicate them. This is where sometimes the Buddha gets the reputation of being like a doctor, because there are certain symptoms that you have in your mind, and then there's a certain antidote or a certain prescription. But the Buddha, while he was a doctor in terms of the way people thought about him and the way that he treated his own mind, you are your own best doctor. You need to be able to have the insight and the wisdom to be able to see the symptoms of what's going on and then apply the remedy. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce you and go through the 7 factors of enlightenment in detail, because in order to understand the eradication and elimination of the 5 hindrances, you need to first understand the 7 factors of enlightenment as tools to help you fine-tune the mind. So I'm going to teach this to you first, and then we're going to walk through the 5 hindrances so that you can see how to apply these 7 factors as well as other teachings that the Buddha shared in order to eliminate the 5 hindrances. So the first factor that the Buddha describes as part of the 7 factors of enlightenment is mindfulness. This is the same mindfulness that shows up on the Eightfold Path, for those of you guys that have studied the Eightfold Path with me, where when you're learning right mindfulness from the Eightfold Path, you generally start out with awareness of mind, because in the unenlightened state, we tend to not be aware of the mind. We just kind of haphazardly go through life. We don't really pay attention to our thoughts and our ideas, the way that we're interacting with other people. We don't really pay attention to what's going on in our own mind. So when you first start out on the path, you would like to be thinking about mindfulness as awareness of mind. Now, not everybody in the world uses this word mindfulness in the same way as the Buddha. You might actually hear somebody say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to the table? And what they're really saying is, can you carefully carry this glass of water to the table? They're not using the word mindful in the way that the Buddha used it. So if you're going to get the real benefit out of the teachings of the Buddha, you need to be able to understand how he's using this word. He's using it as awareness of mind, that you need to be aware of what's going on within your own mind. But more specifically, you need to understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And this is something we're going to talk about at the end of class because it's so crucial to your development on the path to enlightenment. But for now, you might just think about mindfulness as awareness of mind. But then we're going to dive into this deeper after we talk about all the other things that we need to talk about today. And I've taught you guys this at other times, that when we were learning the Eightfold Path, I taught you mindfulness and right mindfulness and what that is. Then in addition to mindfulness, which mindfulness should be practiced all the time, the Buddha gives you these other factors of enlightenment. And remember, these are tools to fine-tune the mind. This factor of investigation is where you have dedicated examination, exploration, research, study, and questioning to learn the teachings. You're examining the teachings, you're investigating them, you're rolling up the sleeves and diving in. You're not believing the teachings, but you're learning, reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing. And this is how you investigate the teachings, where you're dedicated to examining them. Then there's this energy, which is where there's effort, determination, ambition, initiative, motivation. There's this enthusiasm and vigor in the mind. The mind has this willingness to do something. So you need to be able to practice this. Then there's joy. What joy is where the mind is pleased or delighted, not associated with any specific object, where there's unconditioned gladness in the mind. The mind's not attaining this through craving, desire, attachment. That's the conditional happiness, excitement, or elation. What we're talking about here is the unconditioned joy, where there isn't any particular condition that's causing it. So conditional happiness, the mind will get happy when it's maybe sunny outside, or your bank account balance is a certain level, or if your boss does this or does that, you might get happy. But then when those things change, your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. So when it moves from sunshine to rain, you might be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or when your bank account balance goes from one level to another, you might be agitated or annoyed or frustrated. Or if your boss does one thing or another, or your mom or dad does one thing or another, you'll be happy if you get what you want, and then you'll be sad when you don't get what you want. That's the conditional happiness. What we're talking about here is this unconditioned joy, where it's not caused by any particular thing. The mind is just joyful because it's joyful. This is like unconditional gladness or unconditional happiness, where the mind is just happy. Then we've got tranquility. Tranquility is where the mind is relaxed, steady, stable, peaceful, and still. Then we've got concentration, where the mind has this mental alertness, the attentiveness, the ability to give your attention or thought to a particular object or activity. This is singleness of mind from the Eightfold Path, where the mind is focused and concentrated and clear. Then you've got equanimity. Equanimity is mental calmness and composure, especially in difficult situations. This is the evenness of temper, right? So if you got a phone call that your mom was in a terrible car accident and she's in the back of an ambulance being rushed to the hospital, if your mind gets all shaken up and you're running across town to try to meet her at the hospital, that's the opposite of equanimity. What you would like to do is practice equanimity in this situation, because you can run across town and maybe get in an accident yourself, and that's not helping anybody. Or at the very least, you'll show up to the hospital, your mind will be all shaken up, and now the doctors and nurses are trying to help you to explain what's going on with mom so that you can start making some decisions that are going to help her. So if you maintain your calmness and composure, your evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations, now when you arrive to the hospital calmly, you can take in the information that you need to take in and then start making decisions that actually help mom. So these are the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Buddha provides them as a fine tool to be able to go in and actually train the mind. When you first get onto the path to enlightenment, it's kind of like you have this big lunk of wood, this big hunk of wood, and you're trying to make this big sculpture. And if you're making a big sculpture out of a chunk of wood, you're going to get out your hatchet or your axe, and you're going to be chucking off big chunks of wood. Those big chunks of wood that you're hacking off with a hatchet or an axe, that's like wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. You're hacking those off of this piece of wood. But then as you start getting this sculpture down to a certain size, you're going to come in with a fine tool, maybe like a razor blade, in order to put the wrinkles in around the eyes or the eyelashes or something like this. And this is going to create this beautiful sculpture of this individual that you're sculpting on this log. Well, these 7 factors of enlightenment are the same way. They're actually a tool to fine-tune the mind, where mindfulness, the Buddha describes to practice that at all times, from when you first start waking up in the morning, all day long, as you're going to sleep at night. You need to have this awareness of mind, because your thoughts can invade you in the early morning or at any time during the day, or even as you're falling asleep at night. Your thoughts can invade you, and you're going to need to have this awareness of mind where you're cutting things off and letting it go. Essentially, what your mindfulness is it's like a virus scanner that is kind of like in the background, always running. No matter what you're doing, your mindfulness is there. And the virus scanner, it's watching your hard drive at all times. And if at any time a virus hits your hard drive, the virus scanner goes into action, it quarantines the files, and then it cleans them up and gets rid of them, right? So your mindfulness is doing essentially the same thing. It should be there running at all times, from when you first start waking up all day long and as you're going to sleep at night, this awareness of mind. And if at any time you see any unwholesome states in the mind, you need to take action. You need to spring into action and cut that off and let it go and eradicate it from the mind. Well, with your mindfulness and awareness of mind, if you ever notice that the mind is complacent or dull or sluggish or lethargic, you would like to practice the factors of enlightenment of investigation, energy, and joy. Because the last thing the mind wants to do when it's complacent is to investigate the teachings. So that's what you need to do, is apply this effort to move towards the teachings, whether that's coming to classes, reading books, meditating, consulting with a teacher, whatever it might be for you. You need to move in a direction of investigating the teachings to get out of that complacency. Then you're going to need this enlightenment factor of energy. And that's going to start springing up in the mind as you're starting to learn the teachings and you're applying your effort to be able to learn the teachings. They're going to see this ambition and motivation and enthusiasm coming into the mind because you're finally getting the answers to the problems that have been plaguing you. Then you'll notice this joy coming up in the mind where there's this unconditioned gladness. So that's going to lift the mind up out of the dull and lethargic state by practicing the enlightenment factors of investigation, energy, and joy. But then when you notice your mind is overactive and excited and maybe even bouncing off the walls or whatever, when your mind is just overactive, you would like to bring in the tranquility, the concentration, the equanimity. That's what's going to bring the mind to the middle. So more and more you get used to having the mind in the middle, and it'll just stay there all the time. Whereas if you allow the mind to stay in the sluggish state, or you allow it to stay in this overactive and excited state, then the mind's just going to stay wired like that. So you've got to apply the effort to bring that sluggishness to the middle and bring that excitedness to the middle. It's your mindfulness that's going to allow you to observe that. But then you got to have this tool on your tool belt where you understand that investigation, energy, and joy is what's going to bring the mind out of the complacency. And then the tranquility, concentration, equanimity is going to pull it out of the excitement. Okay, so this is the 7 Factors of Enlightenment. And what I'm going to do next is just open up to any and all questions that you guys have to be sure that you understand what these are and see what questions you might need answered before we move on. Because once I move on, I'm going to be teaching you the 5 hindrances and how to apply these and other teachings in order to eliminate those 5 hindrances. So if you guys have any questions here, you can put them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I see Janae has a question here. Why are the 5 hindrances so closely related to the 7 factors of enlightenment? Because the hindrances are what's obstructing you from getting to enlightenment, and it's the 7 factors of enlightenment that are helping you and aiding you to get to enlightenment. So the 7 factors of enlightenment are the solutions to the 5 hindrances. That's what's going to help you overcome them and remove these obstacles out of the mind. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So now I'm going to move on to describing to you the 5 hindrances and then how to actually solve them with various teachings from the Buddha. This first hindrance is called sensual desire. Some of you guys might know this one from the 10 fetters. Sensual desire is where the mind is longing, yearning, wanting pleasure through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. These are referred to as the 6 sense bases. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact. The mind wants to see agreeable things. The mind wants to hear agreeable sounds. The nose wants to smell agreeable odors. The tongue wants agreeable flavors. The body wants agreeable physical objects touching the body. And then the mind is craving for pleasure through the mind itself to have certain thoughts and ideas that are pleasurable. And the mind's craving for this permanently agreeable contact. And as long as there's craving in the mind and you're wanting this permanently agreeable contact, in some cases you're going to get what you want, but in other cases you're not going to get what you want. And when you get what you want, that's where the pleasant feelings are going to arise, like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. And when the mind's not getting what it wants, it's going to get the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. And this is all coming from the mind's sensual desire. So I'll give you some examples of this. Let's just say you're in a car and you're driving down the road and you're at a stoplight. And now the person next to you has music on that you find so enjoyable and so pleasurable. You're dancing in your seat. You're so excited. Like, yeah, that's my jam. All right, let's go. Come on. Right? You're like really excited about this music that this person has next to you. Well, now the light turns green. You guys go forward and you get stopped at the next light. And now somebody else pulls up to you with some other music that you despise and you think it's horrible and you're repulsed by this. And now the mind is experiencing frustration or agitation or annoyance. The mind in the unenlightened state with its lack of wisdom, it'll think that frustration's coming from the person in the car. But in reality, it's coming from your own cravings. It's coming from the central desire. So as long as this central desire is in the mind, you're not going to be able to get to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mind. Or here's another example. Say you're walking down the street and you walk past a flower shop and you smell this wonderful odor coming out of the flower shop. And it's like, wow, that smells so good. all those fresh flowers. But now you walk a few more steps and you get a whiff of the sewer. And now you're repulsed by that. And you think it's so horrible and you start complaining. This is the central desire. The mind is craving for permanently agreeable contact. And because you live in an impermanent world, you're never going to get something that's permanently agreeable to you. Because as long as you have craving, desire, attachment, where you want it this way and you don't like it this way and you're repulsed by it, when these things are being experienced, you're either going to get pleasant feelings or painful feelings. You need to get to the point where you don't see things as agreeable or disagreeable, that it's just contact. It's just contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. You don't see it as agreeable or disagreeable. But as long as there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind will hold on to these things, wanting them to be permanent. So for example, let's just say you have central desire for beer or wine, and you're holding on to that, and you just really like that flavor on the tongue. Well, this is going to hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment, because the mind is holding on to this and it's unwilling to let go. Or any other central desires that the mind is having. Maybe somebody has a pornography addiction. Maybe through the eyes, they really enjoy seeing the human body naked and involved in sexual activity. Well, now in that situation, the mind is holding on to this pornography and is unwilling to let it go. And the mind can only get pleasure when it's having that. And when it doesn't have that, it feels agitated or annoyed or frustrated. So this is going to hinder somebody from getting to enlightenment. If they continue to hold on, the mind continues to have this central desire, then the mind's going to be unable to get to enlightenment. So the way that you solve this is through eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And the way that you do this is you target it with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. Of course, it's the Eightfold Path, which is the core central teaching that is going to eradicate all craving, desire, attachment. You need to be able to learn and practice the Eightfold Path. That's why the Buddha talks about it in that first discourse that I shared. Without the Eightfold Path, nothing else is going to experience progress on the path. You're not going to be able to make progress. So that's why at the beginning of this program, I walked you through that in 3 separate classes, and then we did it again in chapter 4 and 5, because the Eightfold Path is so crucial and so critical. But in terms of the 2 techniques that are actually targeting this is breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. So when your mind's focused on the breath and it moves off the breath, you're training your mind to let go, let go, let go. You're not training the mind to eliminate your thoughts. You're training the mind to notice the thoughts sooner and sooner. That's your mindfulness. You're training the mind to have concentration so you can focus on the breath. And when the mind does move off the breath, you're training the mind to let go. So if 10, 20, 30 different times during your meditation, you had to let go, this is actually really good for the mind. Because if you think back to that boyfriend or girlfriend that you were with, that everything was so pleasurable when you guys first got together, when you guys broke up, you were missing them. You were lonely. You were bored. You had anger or frustration or some other discontent feelings, and you couldn't let them go. You were craving for them to be permanent. And it wasn't until your mind let go that you gained your peacefulness and your joy. You were like, you know what? If they would like to be with somebody else, so be it. Or if they would like to move across town or move to another city or another country, so be it. And your mind let go. And that's where the joy came back in. So what you need to be able to do is train this mind to let go. And that's what breathing, mindfulness, meditation is doing. And when you train your mind enough to let go, eventually it will never grab on and crave for things to be permanent. So this consistent breathing, mindfulness, meditation that you are looking to build up to 2 to 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more, this is training your mind to let go. So 2 to 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more could sound like a lot for some people. But if you look at your life, there's probably certain unbeneficial things that you're doing that if you looked at those things, you could probably get rid of those. And you'll actually find that you have more time to do things like training your mind, which is going to be much more beneficial for you. Now, all throughout this group learning program, I've been gradually increasing the amount of time that we meditate each session. So this session that we just did was a 30-minute session. So it can sometimes take 6 months, a year, or 2 years for somebody to build up to a 2 to 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more. But if you've been meditating with me over the last 7 months, I've been gradually elongating these sessions to the point where now you should be meditating for 30 minutes if you've been meditating with me in these classes. And then maybe you have some more work to do on your own, but you would gradually like to be building up to that, because that's going to train your mind to let go, let go, let go. Then there's this generosity. The generosity is where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. The generosity is there to train your mind to let go also. Because with craving, desire, attachment in the mind, you'll tend to hold on to things very tightly and you'll become selfish. So you need to be able to live open-handedly and be joyful in letting go, training your mind that things don't have to be self-satisfying all the time and that you can let go and eliminate this selfishness. Because as our mind accumulates craving, desire, attachment, we tend to have the perspective of, if I spend 3 hours doing this, I want this in return. Or if I spend 3 days doing this, I want this in return. And that's the mind's craving, desire, attachment, wanting things to be self-satisfying all the time. But if you can practice generosity on a daily basis, where you're frequently giving and sharing, this will train your mind to do so without any expectation of anything in return. And you can be finding all different kinds of ways to do this, right? Like if you're walking into a store, you could hold the door for somebody, and this would be generosity. You're sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return. Now, you need to be sure that there's no expectation, because if you're standing there expecting a thank you, you'll be frustrated when they don't say thank you, because not everyone's going to say thank you. So you can't even expect a thank you when you're practicing generosity. You need to just give and share without any expectation of anything in return. And if you're doing this frequently, multiple times a day in different ways, then this will really help you. So for example, if you find that you're attached to money and you're holding on to it tight, rather than giving like $500 once a year to some charity, it would be better to give $1 a day, because each day your mind's having to let go, let go, let go, let go. Or say that your clothes come out of the washing machine or the dryer and you see that they're ripped and you get frustrated about that. It would be wise for you to start sharing your clothes. Maybe you give some away, maybe you share them with other people, let them wear them. Or if you notice that you're attached to your jewelry, you might decide to share your jewelry and let other people wear it, or even give some of it away. This is going to help your mind to let go of these things. So practicing generosity frequently each day, as well as practicing meditation frequently each day, that's going to target the craving, desire, attachment and train your mind to let go, so you're no longer forming inner feelings based on some condition. If the mind gets its central desires fulfilled, you get happy. But if they don't get fulfilled, you get angry or sad or frustrated. You're trying to eliminate that, where your mind isn't craving for things to be one way or another. And something else that you can do here is something called guarding the doorways to discontentedness. This is something that the Buddha taught, that you can guard your mind, guard the doorways. The doorways are the 6 sense bases: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. Every time you get discontent, it's because there's been some contact through the 6 sense bases. And now the mind has craving, desire, attachment, and it's going to see that contact as either agreeable or disagreeable. If you see it as agreeable, you'll get pleasant feelings. If you see it as disagreeable, you will get the painful feelings. So you need to guard the mind and realize that there's going to be this contact coming through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. I'll give you an example of this. That there was a time when I was getting rid of coffee, and I knew that coffee was not helpful for me at all. The caffeine was causing the mind to be too overactive, and I decided I was going to get rid of this caffeine, and I was going to get rid of the coffee. So I was gradually expanding the amount of time that I was going without coffee for like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I would have a coffee after 1 week, and then I would go 2 weeks without one. I would end up having a coffee. I would go 3 or 4 weeks without one. I would have a coffee. I went as long as 8 weeks and I didn't have a coffee. This is one of the reasons why I moved to Thailand, actually, because I really enjoy the coffee here. They have coffee on every single street corner, pretty much. Really good coffee, iced coffee, right? So as I was thinking like, wow, it's been 8 weeks that I haven't had a coffee. This craving is gone out of the mind. And I was feeling all conceited and arrogant and boastful, like, wow, look at me. I'm getting rid of all these cravings. Aren't I so great? Right. And I was walking down the street, and next thing I know, I passed by a coffee shop and I got a whiff of the odor of the coffee. And boom, I was right in there in the coffee shop. I was waiting in line. And I know that when I drank coffee, it gives me headaches, and sometimes a headache for 3 days. And I would feel miserable. But the craving was too strong. I was standing in line waiting for the line to go through so that I could get up front and I could actually order my coffee. And the whole time standing in line, I was telling myself, what are you doing to yourself? You're going to have a headache. You're going to feel miserable after this. This is so silly. You've gone 8 weeks without one. Why are you going back to it? I kept talking to myself, but the craving was too strong. When I got up to the front of the line, iced coffee, please, right? I just ordered my iced coffee. And then I sat down with it and I drank about a third of it or about a half of it. And then I threw it away, and that was the last coffee that I ever had. But nonetheless, what drew me in is that I wasn't guarding the doorways to discontentedness. I got that odor through the nose, that wonderful odor of coffee, and it pulled me right in. The craving arose and I went right into the coffee shop. Well, now identifying this and seeing what the problem was, that I wasn't guarding my doorways, I started to guard my doorways better. That when I was walking down the street, if I saw a coffee shop, I would actually cross to the other side of the street so I wouldn't get the odor, because the mind was somewhat sensitive at that time. It still had a craving. So for a few months, I had to cross the street whenever I saw a coffee shop coming, and I had to guard the doorways. And then eventually, when I let go of the craving, desire, attachment, I don't need to do that anymore. There are situations now where students invite me to go have a conversation at a coffee shop because they're maybe interested in drinking coffee. They would like to get some personal guidance. And they say, hey, can you meet me at this coffee shop? So I go to the coffee shop, and now I might order a smoothie or a bottle of water or something like that. And I just sit there and I help them with whatever challenges that they might have. I can smell coffee all day long, and I'm not remotely interested in ordering a coffee because the mind has eliminated the craving. But as long as the craving was in there, I needed to guard the doorways. And when I wasn't guarding the doorways, that's what pulled me into the coffee shop. So you'll be able to trace any kind of situation where you're experiencing discontentedness to contact through the ears, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself. It's going to be contact through one of these that your discontentedness is arising. Think about it when you're arguing with your friends or family. It's certain things that you're seeing in their body language. There's certain things that you're hearing from them, right? That these are the contact that you're experiencing, or that music that you're hearing when you're waiting at the stoplight. That's coming through the ears, right? There's always going to be contact. And it's a central desire that's causing the mind to experience the conditional pleasant feelings, the painful feelings, or the feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So practicing breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, as well as guarding the doorways, is what's going to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. Where you find that your mind is attracted to something and you're trying to hold on to it, and you want this thing to get pleasant feelings, you're going to need to distance yourself from that and train your mind to let it go. Where you find that you're repulsed by something and you're pushing something away, you actually need to put the mind in that situation in order to train it to be comfortable. So for example, if there's a certain cologne that you find just to be so amazing, you're going to need to distance yourself from that for a period of time, maybe weeks or months, and train your mind to let that go. But if there's like a smell, like a sewer that you're repulsed by, you're going to need to go stand by the sewer and take some nice deep breaths in order to train your mind like, hey, this is impermanent and I don't need to form my feelings based on this odor. So in situations where your central desire is pulling you close to something and you're wanting to hold on to it, you're going to need to distance yourself from it so you can train your mind to let it go. But where you're repulsed by something and you're pushing it away, you're going to need to put your mind in that situation to be able to be comfortable and train your mind that this is impermanent, and you can train your mind to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. Because when the mind gets what it wants, it's going to get those pleasant feelings. But when it doesn't get what it wants, it's going to get the painful ones. And now this is where the ill will comes in. When you're not getting what you want, you'll falsely attribute this to something external. With the mind's lack of wisdom, this anger, hatred, hostility, the bitterness, the aggression, the resentment, the frustration, the irritation, the annoyance, all of this will start to arise. And now when this is arising, the mind will become unskillful, that you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile towards people through your intention, speech, and actions. And now you're going to damage your relationships. And this is really unwise. You know, we weren't born with ill will in our mind. We didn't go into the nursery at the hospital hating other babies, but we acquired this over time. That when we were little kids, we had sensual desire, as you might have now since you're unenlightened. But as a child, we might have craved chocolate or ice cream. And we were like, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, buy me chocolate, buy me ice cream. And they bought us chocolate and ice cream, and we were so happy. It was the best day on earth. They were the best parents we've ever found, right? But then somewhere along the line, it was like, mommy, daddy, buy me chocolate, buy me ice cream. And they said, no, you can't have it. And we got angry and we got frustrated, and we thought they were the most worst parents that we've ever met, right? And this is because the mind wasn't getting its cravings fulfilled. There was this anger that came up in the mind. And now we formed what's called a mental object, or this particular hindrance, this fetter of ill will got formed in the mind. And now this deeply rooted container in the mind of ill will is motivating this unskillful conduct. Like right now, you probably aren't angry. You probably aren't frustrated. You're just listening to me talk. But if somebody triggers one of your cravings, when that craving gets triggered, and now that anger is arising, you could potentially be really bitter, harsh, or hostile to people, or maybe aggressive or resentful towards someone. The way that you transform all of this is through loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life. The loving kindness meditation is going to essentially rewire the mind. Whereas if you keep going down this path of anger and bitterness and hostility, you know where that leads, is it leads to broken relationships. And if you continue to go down that path, the mind's going to just continue to have this well-worn path of anger, and you'll never get rid of it. Or you can get out your machete and you can start breaking through the branches and the bushes and forge this new path. That's why it's a bit challenging to go down this path of loving kindness, because you got to get out your machete and you got to start breaking down some bushes. So now with this loving kindness meditation that you also integrate into your 2 or 3 sessions per day, it can be one of those, or it can be 2 of those, it can be 3 of those. Out of your day, you should have at least one of them be loving kindness. And if you have it in the morning, this is going to set you up to go out into your day and practice loving kindness in your day-to-day intention, speech, and actions. Because that's where the real transformation is happening. You could do loving kindness meditation all day long, but if you went outside and you were bitter and harsh and hostile to people, you're not making any real transformation. So you need to be able to do the meditation and then go out into your day-to-day life and practice loving kindness through your intention, speech, and actions. And that's where the real change is occurring. So the loving kindness meditation is like filling up your gas tank so that then you can go out into the world and be loving and kind. And now you'll transform your relationships. Because if you've been bitter and aggressive and hostile and resentful or irritated in your relationships, that stuff's all coming back to you. Whether it's your life partner, your children, your parents, your boss, your coworkers, as you've been putting that stuff out, it's going to all come back to you. And oftentimes we want other people to change, and we think that's how our life is going to improve. But the way your life improves is you got to work on your own mind. So the Buddha gives you these tools and these techniques of loving kindness meditation to fill up the mind and envelop it so that it's permeating with loving kindness. And then you can go out into the world practicing the Eightfold Path of right intention, right speech, and right action, where you're practicing loving kindness in day-to-day life. And more, you get this new pathway that your mind's more and more comfortable to go down. This old pathway will get overgrown. Because if you understand right view, you understand any anger that you're experiencing is coming from your own mind. So it would be really unwise to be bitter and harsh and hostile to other people, because it's your own anger. Your anger is being caused by your own mind. It's not this person. Now, this person could be doing something unwise, but that's not what's causing the anger. It's the mind itself. It's cravings, desires, attachments. So more and more, when your central desires aren't getting fulfilled and you're noticing the anger and the frustration arising, be sure you understand that that's coming from your own mind. And the last thing you're interested in doing is being bitter and harsh and hostile. You need to be able to practice loving kindness in all situations. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even have the slightest dislike towards another being, that you will love all beings. You'll have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And that can be quite hard for you right now, depending on where you are in your practice. You might be at the point where you can only love people if they agree with you or if the people do things your way. So you need to be able to separate the person from the choices and decisions that they make, where you can disagree with the choices and decisions that someone makes while still loving the person. That's what you would like to ultimately get to. And realizing with the universal truth of impermanence, there's nobody on the face of the earth that is going to make decisions the same way as you. There's only one person on the entire earth that's going to make decisions exactly the same way as you every single time. And I think you know who that is, right? It's you. You're the only one. So if you can only love people who make decisions the same way as you can only love one person, and that's yourself. And sometimes you might even find that to be challenging, right? So you need to be able to separate the choices and decisions that someone makes from the person themselves. So that way you can love the person, have a genuine interest in seeing this person be well, while you disagree with their choices and decisions. And that's a normal part of life, that you're going to disagree with what people say, what people do. And that doesn't mean you have to hate them. It just means that they're doing things differently. But if you have a craving in your mind for everybody to do things the same way as you, when people don't do things your way, you'll get angry or bitter or harsh. So this loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in day-to-day life will transform this. Because as long as you have anger in your mind for any being whatsoever, or any kind of anger whatsoever, or even the slightest annoyance, your mind's not experiencing enlightenment. You need to get completely liberated from this and uproot it. So this is a hindrance or an obstacle to your enlightenment, that as long as you have even a dislike towards somebody else, your mind's not enlightened. Because the only reason why you dislike that person is because they're not meeting your expectations. They're not meeting your cravings, desires, attachments. If they did things your way, you would like them, right? But the reason why the mind dislikes them is because its cravings aren't getting fulfilled. Its wants and expectations aren't getting fulfilled. So if you get those things out of the way, you can start loving all beings. Then this third one is complacency. What complacency is where the mind is dull, lethargic, it's lacking motivation. If you see any of the really old translations, you might see this referred to as sloth and torpor. And I translate this as complacency. Essentially, the mind is dull and lethargic. It's lacking motivation. It's lacking enthusiasm and ambition. It's lacking initiative. It doesn't want to do things. Essentially, the unenlightened mind can do two things. It can chase. That's the central desire, where the mind's longing, yearning, and chasing after things. Or the mind's all the way on the other side, where it's dull and lethargic. It's exhausted because it's been chasing so much that it's exhausted, and it swings to the other side where there's this dullness and this lethargic condition. And what the Buddha is doing is he's inviting you to come to the middle, where you can have sustainable energy all day long. But you can't get to that if you keep allowing the mind to swing back and forth like this, where you're chasing, and then you're dull and lethargic. And the longer the mind is staying in either one of those conditions, the harder it is to bring it to the middle. So you would like to catch this complacency as soon as possible. When you see that the mind's complacent, like it's pushing things away, it's dull, it's lethargic, it's lacking a willingness to do something, you would like to bring in the enlightenment factors of investigation, energy, and joy, where you roll up the sleeves and you investigate the teachings of the Buddha. That's going to help you get out of this complacency. Because when the mind's complacent, the last thing it wants to do is meditate or read a book or come to class or talk to your teacher or listen to a podcast or a video or audiobook. The mind's dull and lethargic. And as long as you allow the mind to be in that unmotivated state, it's not taking in the teachings that it needs in order to get to enlightenment. So this is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment because the mind's complacent. It's not willing to do the work to be trained. Now, I understand it can be sometimes a struggle and somewhat difficult to practice these teachings. But that's only because the mind lacks wisdom. If you continue to allow it to be complacent and you're not cultivating wisdom, it's going to stay in that complacency. But if you roll up the sleeves, if you sink in and start investigating the teachings and start cultivating your wisdom, that's where the mind will come out of that complacency into the middle, where you can gradually be learning little by little by little. So let me know what questions you guys have on any of these three before we move on to the next two. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in here on YouTube. How do we arise tranquility? This is through right effort. If you go back to the Eightfold Path, which is what I taught, this is where you eliminate unwholesome qualities from the mind and you bring in the wholesome qualities. You need to apply the effort to do this. When you're eradicating craving, desire, attachment out of the mind will become more calm and more tranquil, but you need to arise this through applying right effort. You need to apply the effort to bring in the calmness, to bring in the peacefulness, the steadiness. So whenever you see the mind shaken up and it's overactive, you need to calm it down and apply the effort to do that. And this is going to help you when you have all these different tools that the Buddha shares. Okay, here's some questions on Facebook. Is guarding the doorways to discontentedness the same as the Eightfold Path? Guarding the doorways to discontentedness is part of the Eightfold Path. Everything integrates into the Eightfold Path at some point. But guarding the doorways is to know with wisdom that discontentedness is going to arise when you take in contact through the six sense bases. And now use your mindfulness to be alert and to be aware anytime there's contact through the six sense bases, that if it's triggering a particular craving, desire, attachment, that you're aware of that. So you need to guard the mind. So let's just say, there's a particular friend that you have and you really get along with this friend really well, but they are friends with somebody else that you don't really get along with very well. And now you know that you're going to see your friend and this other person is there at your friend's house. Well, if you're going to guard your doorways to discontentedness, you might choose not to go to that house and visit your friend that day. Or maybe you delay it for a few hours until this other friend leaves. Not that you're avoiding them or not that you're pushing them away. That's not going to solve your problem. But in that particular moment, maybe you don't have the composure of your mind to be confronted with this contact from this other friend. And you would rather just kind of distance yourself from it for a while and train your mind to let this craving go. But maybe on another day, maybe you have some more composure of your mind and you still would like to guard the doorways. And now you're going over your friend's house and this other person is there. And you, on your way to your friend's house, need to remind yourself to guard your doorways. That if at any point you notice irritation or frustration arising, you need to just kindly walk away, go for a walk outside. Don't allow the mind to experience this discontentedness. You need to be able to cut it off and let it go. So this would be guarding the mind and guarding these doorways. Then Janae asks, does joy mean to be pleased with what is? Yes, 100%. Just be pleased with what is, rather than longing, yearning for something different than what is existing. Chris is asking, does complacency also refer to a lack of motivation for physical work? Yes, in terms of the hindrances of hindrance to your enlightenment, complacency is referring to complacency about studying the teachings of the Buddha. But also, if your mind was complacent in any other aspect of your life, you're not going to be able to experience enlightenment. An enlightened being doesn't just sit around and do nothing all day, right? Maybe you need to do this. If you have a day or two off, you might need to do these kinds of things where you're getting some rest and relaxation. But nonetheless, an enlightened being is going to be doing something to progress forward in life. So when we talk about complacency in relationship to the five hindrances, it's complacency about studying the teachings of the Buddha and being disinterested in actually learning and growing and developing. That the mind is running away from this responsibility to train your mind. But also, you need to ensure that you're not complacent in other parts of your life too. Okay, let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next two. These are really straightforward and actually really easy to teach I won't have to explain them as much because you'll understand them really readily. This fourth one is restlessness and worry. What this is where the mind is overactive, where there's this confused, distracted, restless state of mind. And you might even be worried about your own unskillful conduct, that your mind is overactive, you're uptight. If you have obsessive thoughts, this is the restlessness in the mind. It might even be showing up in the body. If you like kind of bob your knee and tap your foot a lot, or if you tap your fingers on the table a lot, this is the mind is overactive and it's coming out through the body. So you'll see this restlessness, this overactivity in the mind. And because of this, the mind will be confused and distracted. There'll be this restless state of mind. And then the mind will worry. It'll worry about your own unskillful conduct. When you do something that's unskillful, you'll worry of, oh my goodness, this is so bad. Or you'll worry about the world and things that are going on in the world. So this is going to hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment, because an enlightened being doesn't have a restless mind and they don't worry, right? Their mind isn't overactive. Their mind is very steady, very stable, very consistent. They're able to think through their thoughts one at a time, and they don't worry about anything whatsoever. So the way that you eliminate this overactivity of the mind is by bringing in the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. That singleness of mind is the concentration. So you need to apply right effort to arise these enlightenment factors of tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So whenever you see with your mindfulness that you have restlessness and worry, you need to be able to know that's the symptom. And now the antidote is tranquility, concentration, equanimity, and bring those into the mind. Then the fifth one is doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. If you have doubt about whether these teachings will actually lead to your enlightenment, this is where complacency can actually come into the mind, because there's doubt. The way you eliminate doubt is not by blind belief or faith or anything like this. The way you eliminate doubt is through investigation of the teachings, by examining the teachings. Because if you're learning the teachings and examining them, if you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing the teachings on a day-to-day basis, this is going to allow you to cultivate wisdom. And the more wisdom that you have about the path to enlightenment, and the more you've trained your mind, you'll see the improvement to the condition of your mind. It's only a matter of time before the mind starts moving towards enlightenment. And you'll see that your mind is becoming more peaceful, your life is becoming more peaceful, your relationships are becoming more peaceful, you're more easily able to handle things in your day-to-day life. You'll start noticing that you'll sleep better, you'll have better sleep, and eventually you're going to see so much progress that you'll eliminate your doubt, that you will have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind and life. But the way you get to that is through investigation of the teachings, not through blind belief. So by the time you eliminate your doubt, you're not enlightened yet, but you're well on your way. By the time you eliminate doubt, you will have confidence in the Buddha, because you will have known that his teachings are absolutely working. You will have confidence in his teachings. You'll have confidence in the community that you're part of, because you'll see that there's teachers and other practitioners that are more than willing to help you. You'll have confidence in your teacher because they've been able to guide you to this improved mental state. And you'll have confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment because you see that there's been progress and that your mind is moving to more and more peace and more joy. So this is how you eliminate the doubt, is through investigation of the teachings. And this will arise the confidence in the mind, in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. Now, these are the five hindrances. The way the Buddha describes them as the five hindrances. He has other teachings where he talks about the 16 hindrances or the 32 hindrances. But there's one hindrance that he talks about that is above all other hindrances. He doesn't list it here because he talks about it so much in all of his other teachings. The highest level of hindrance that you are going to find that's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion, the misunderstanding, the misperception about how the world truly works. Oftentimes people translate this as ignorance. If there's ignorance in the mind, where the mind is confused or lacking wisdom about the path to enlightenment, this is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. The way that you eliminate ignorance is, yes, there's a certain amount of intellectual learning that you need to do. There's a certain amount of reflection to independently verify the teachings, but it's your practice that is going to eliminate the ignorance. Because you can intellectually know something's unwise for you, but you still do it because of the mind's ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So at different times, we might have known that drugs and alcohol are unwise for us. And we knew that intellectually, but we still did it because we had ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So once we start practicing the teachings, that's where the ignorance is fully eradicated from the mind. If you just intellectually know the teachings and you're not actually practicing them, there's still this unknowing of true reality because the mind doesn't see the wise decision making and it's not actually making those wise decisions. So while all these are hindrances, you wouldn't even know about these hindrances if the ignorance is in the mind. So that's why you're learning, reflecting to independently verify and practice so you can get to the point where you have wisdom about all the teachings, the three universal truths, the four noble truths, the eightfold path, the five precepts, the seven factors of enlightenment, the Brahma Viharas, the extensive meditation training, the 10 fetters. All these teachings that you're going to need is what's going to help you to cultivate wisdom about the path to enlightenment. And that's going to help you to completely move past all these hindrances by cultivating wisdom. When you have ignorance or unknowing of true reality, that's the biggest hindrance of all hindrances. And that's why the mind stays stuck in this constant cycle of continuing to experience discontentedness over and over and over again. And that's why it continues to experience rebirth over and over and over again as well. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have about these. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, so Christine is asking a question here on Zoom. I find it hard to distinguish between complacency and really being exhausted physically and needing rest. What criteria can be applied here? So complacency, the mind's going to be dull and lethargic, and it's going to be a long-term thing. You're going to see it for multiple days where the mind is just dull and lethargic. It doesn't even want to do really anything at all. You're going to feel like you're dragging your feet. Where when you're exhausted, the mind just needs rest. And if you get a little bit of rest, you can get right back out there and start doing whatever it is that you need to be doing. So that's how you can distinguish between these two. Okay, let me see what other questions we might have. You're welcome, Christine. Pleased to help you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is end by sharing with you more about mindfulness, because mindfulness is going to be what helps you to identify the five hindrances in the mind. And this is also what's going to help you transform the mind to be able to get to enlightenment, not just identify the five hindrances, but any other unwholesome state in the mind as well. I taught this multiple times through the program, but here I'm going to hone in on it really closely as part of our class. So when I teach right mindfulness, I teach that this is helping you to develop awareness of mind. And this is what you generally might sit with, and you might practice for multiple months, where you're just gaining this awareness of mind. And it's your breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing mindfulness in day-to-day life that's going to help you to cultivate this awareness of mind. So you need that breathing mindfulness meditation to be able to get to awareness of mind. Because in the unenlightened state, when we lack wisdom, we really aren't really paying attention usually to our thoughts and ideas. We're just kind of plowing through the world, knocking down the trees and burning up the forest. But as you're starting to gain more and more awareness of the mind and the thoughts and ideas and what's going on in your mind, you would ultimately like to develop the four foundations of mindfulness. This is where you're learning about the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness, that there's going to be this early warning system, these bodily sensations that are starting to arise before your mind experiences a feeling. Then once the mind has experienced a feeling, it's going to affect the condition of your mind, that for a few hours, a few days, for a week or two, you're going to have this general condition of the mind where it's grumpy or irritable or agitated. And then it's going to feed and it's going to form these mental objects, these deeply rooted containers in the mind. What the Buddha is essentially cluing you into here is this life cycle that discontentedness takes. That when you have contact through the six sense bases, if there's a craving, desire, attachment in the mind, Whether it's going to be a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant, there's going to be some bodily sensation. This is the early warning system. With pleasant feelings, it can oftentimes be tingling across the shoulders, the back of the neck, over the top of the head. We call this maybe warm fuzzies in some cultures. And you might really indulge in that. And you're like, oh, wow, this feels so great. This feels so lovely. But what you should be doing is cutting that off and letting it go. If you allow the mind to get that conditioned pleasant feeling, the painful feeling's waiting for you right around the corner. Because whatever condition that existed to give you that pleasant feeling, when that condition changes, your mind's going to end up in the painful feeling. So you need to be able to see the conditional pleasant feelings just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. You need to be willing to let go of the temporary pleasure in order to be able to get to the permanent happiness, the permanent joy, the unconditioned joy, the unconditioned happiness. Because as long as you allow your mind to form this pleasant feeling based on a condition, it's going to keep staying wired that way. And now when that condition changes, your mind's going to end up in the painful feeling. So when you feel those warm fuzzies coming across the back of the shoulders and up the head, you need to cut that off and let it go. Train the mind, nope, not going to let you do that. And also, if you're noticing a painful feeling, that it isn't a feeling yet, but it's just a bodily sensation. Something like anger, it might be like tingling in the body, rising from the feet up towards the head. You might notice tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, pressure in the skull. These are all bodily sensations associated with painful feelings about to arise. And these are going to be unique to you. But where you see that, you would like to cut it off and let it go. Because this is the early warning system where the mind is alerting you that you're about to get a conditioned feeling. So it's kind of like the mind saying, I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. And you're like, nope, not going to let you do that. Because if you allow the mind to get the conditioned feeling, now the mind stays wired that way. But if you can cut it off and let it go, you preserved your mind. You protected the doorways. You now protected the mind. That the mind is now protected, that it's not getting this conditioned feeling. It's not suppressing your feelings. It's actually cutting it off and letting it go before it actually becomes a feeling. It's kind of like if you were taking a boat from one country to another and you were out in the middle of the ocean, you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Because once the water gets in the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. So if you allow the anger to come into the mind as a feeling, now it's a lot harder to get rid of it. So when your mind is alerting you through the bodily sensations that, hey, I'm about to get a conditioned feeling, you got to say, nope, I'm not going to let you do that. So I'll give you an example of how this might look in day-to-day life. If you're sitting on the sofa and you're watching the news and you're noticing that you're having this contact through the eyes and through the ears, and you're now hearing something and seeing something that the mind does not like, and it's about to get frustrated, there's going to be some bodily sensations associated with that. And rather than just sit there and dwell in that and allow the mind to form the conditioned feeling, get up and walk away, right? Cut off the news, go out for a walk, go out for a bike ride, go to the kitchen, get a glass of water, or whatever it is, cut that off. That's protecting the mind. Because if it becomes a feeling, now you've got to deal with that and you've got to get it out. And it's a lot harder to get it out. And between now and enlightenment, you are going to experience some conditioned feelings. These bodily sensations that I'm talking about, you may or may not even be aware of them right now. If you're aware of them, great. The more you meditate, the more you practice generosity, you'll get longer and longer periods of time to be able to take action. I've seen these bodily sensations last as short as like 1 second or as long as about 8 to 10 seconds. And that's when the mind is well developed, that you'll see that 8 to 10 seconds, that you get this elongated period of time to take action and cut them off. And if you don't, it's going to become a feeling, right? And you're going to experience conditioned feelings between now and enlightenment. So if you miss it as a bodily sensation, cut it off as a feeling. Because if you don't cut it off there, it's going to affect the condition of the mind for a few hours or a few days. But you can also cut it off there too, because otherwise it's going to feed a mental object, which is a deeply rooted container in the mind. And you'd like to revert this. You'd like to essentially put a blockade at the bodily sensations so that you're no longer feeding these mental objects. And all the while, you're using all the tools and techniques of the Buddha to break up these mental objects and get them out of the mind. The 10 fetters are all mental objects, as well as the 5 hindrances. These are all mental objects. And you would like to purify the mind of these mental objects. So you're going to need to have awareness of each one of these things: the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and these mental objects. And as you grow and develop on the path to enlightenment, you'll get more and more wisdom to understand this and then be able to practice it in day-to-day life, where you can observe these 4 different things. So let me know if you guys have questions here, because this is really pivotal for you to be able to transform the mind, not only to eliminate the 5 hindrances, but to eliminate the 10 fetters and to transform the mind so that it's no longer experiencing discontentedness. So you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So you guys must be understanding this to a certain degree. So what I'm going to do here is just in class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for anything that you've done to contribute to this program, whether it's showing up to learn and grow and develop, whether it's meditating on your own, whether it's reading and investigating the teachings, whether it's asking questions in class or contributing to our discussions, or maybe you've practiced some generosity where you've shared some offerings with me to be able to help me afford to be able to share these teachings with you. So this is the very last class of this iteration of the group learning program. So I just would like to end with a very warm thank you and lots of appreciation and respect for anything that you've contributed to help make this program a success. And then at the same time, I would like to invite you to join for the next one. If you would like to continue to learn and continue to grow, you can actually join next Sunday and continue in the group learning program. Or maybe you would like to step back a little bit and just kind of breathe for a little bit and kind of implement the things that you've already learned. Or maybe you would like to go to the Pali Canon and English study group or some other program, one of the courses or retreats that I teach. You're welcome to get involved in any of these classes, courses, and retreats that I teach. You're welcome to get personal guidance and reach out for help at any point. So I'm here to help you as you learn and practice, and you're interested to learn more. Just let me know. I'm here to help every single one of you. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. This Wednesday, I'm going to be doing meditation with everybody and opening up to any and all questions that you have. On Saturday, I'm going to be doing the Pali Canon and English study group. And then on Sunday, we're going to be restarting from the very beginning of the group learning program. So whatever you choose to do, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day, and perhaps we'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.